Good evening. I want to begin with a question, a simple one. Look around you, or rather, think about your home, your street, your life. What is the one species, other than our own, that is most seamlessly woven into the fabric of our everyday existence? The one whose absence would leave a silence we could almost feel. It is, of course, the dog, Canis familiaris. But here is our first mystery, lying at the very beginning of our story tonight. Consider the wolf, Canis lupus, aloof, wild, a symbol of untamed nature. And then consider a dog, perhaps a Labrador, a poodle, a mutt you know and love. Their eyes meet ours in utterly different ways. One partnership is tens of thousands of years old, the other we have kept at bay. So, the fundamental question, how did that creature become this creature? How did the wolf step from the shadows of the forest into the light of our hearts, and eventually onto the very foot of our beds? This is not just a story of domestication. This is a co-evolutionary epic, a tale of two species walking parallel paths that slowly, inexorably twisted together into a single, unbreakable braid. We shaped them, yes, but they shaped us in return, influencing our survival, our myths, our social structures, and even our capacity for empathy. Tonight, we embark on a 40,000-year journey. We will track this partnership from ancient, icy campfires to the gilded halls of empires, from the soot of industrial cities to the sleek genomics labs of the 21st century. We will see how dogs made us human, and how we, in turn, sculpted the wolf into an astonishing kaleidoscope of forms. This journey begins not with a command, but with a curious glance across a clearing. Let's travel back in our minds. It's the late Pleistocene, somewhere in Eurasia, perhaps 30,000 to 40,000 years ago. Glaciers are the dominant force on the landscape, advancing and retreating. Humans are nomadic hunter-gatherers, living in small, mobile bands. And wolves are the supreme apex predators, our direct competitors for the same large game, and perhaps our most astute observers. For a long time, the story we told ourselves was neat and utilitarian. We called it the garbage dump hypothesis. It went like this. As humans became more settled, even temporarily, we created middens, piles of discarded bones and scraps. The wolves, ever opportunistic, lurked at the edges. The boldest, least fearful ones ventured closest. They got the most food. They survived and reproduced. Generation after generation, this selection for tameness continued. We, in turn, found these tamer wolves useful. They barked at approaching predators or rival bands, a mutually beneficial arrangement. Natural selection did the work, and eventually, a human somewhere reached out and took a puppy. Domestication was, in essence, an accident of convenience. It's a logical story. But is it the complete story? Recent discoveries in genetics, archaeology, and animal behavior have woven a far richer, more collaborative tapestry. The first seismic clue came from genetics. By comparing the DNA of modern dogs and wolves from around the world, scientists made a startling discovery. The split, the divergence of the dog lineage from the wolf lineage, began not 10,000 years ago with agriculture, but much earlier, between 20,000 and 40,000 years ago. This was deep in our hunter-gatherer past, long before permanent settlements and their accompanying garbage dumps. So, if not trash, what sparked the connection? I want you to consider a different, more dynamic possibility. Not scavenging, but hunting. Think about the similarities. Both humans and wolves are intelligent, social, cooperative hunters. We pursue the same large herbivores: reindeer, mammoth, bison. We use similar tactics: encirclement, persistence, communication. Is it so hard to imagine our ancestors observing wolf packs from a distance, learning from their strategies? Or perhaps, on rare occasions, finding themselves moving in a kind of unspoken, interspecies collaboration against a common prey? A wolf pack might flush game toward human hunters lying in wait. A human band might follow wolves to a fresh kill to scavenge their leftovers. This was not domestication yet, but it was the beginning of a wary, mutual recognition. And then, the pivotal, intimate moment. It likely didn't involve a snarling adult. It involved a pup. A wolf den is discovered. Perhaps the adults are killed for their fur or in defense. The vulnerable pups remain. And here, human nature intervenes. A child's pleading eyes, a curiosity about the soft, small creature. A pup is spared, brought back to camp. Now imagine that pup. It is not yet fully imprinted on wolf society. Its critical socialization window, a period of a few crucial weeks, is still open. In the camp, it bonds not with wolves, but with humans. It is fed scraps. It plays with children. It learns the sights, sounds, and smells of humanity. It joins the hunt, running alongside, using its superior senses to track and flush game. It sleeps by the fire, its warmth a welcome addition on a cold night. It barks at strange noises, becoming that early warning system. This was no calculated eugenics program. It was, as biologist Raymond Coppinger called it, survival of the friendliest. That first generation of tame wolves, their offspring, raised in the human environment from birth, were tamer still. A new, powerful, selective pressure was born. Selection for tameness, for sociability, for the ability to read human cues. And here, the story takes a fascinating detour into 20th century Siberia. In the 1950s, Soviet geneticist Dmitry Belyaev began a landmark experiment with silver foxes. He selected and bred them for one trait, and one trait only: tameness. He chose the foxes that were least fearful and aggressive toward humans. The results were breathtaking. Within just a few generations, the foxes began to wag their tails, whine for attention, lick their handlers' hands. Their physiology began to change unexpectedly. Floppy ears, piebald, spotted coats, curly tails, shorter snouts. These traits, part of the domestication syndrome, appeared as a genetic package deal with tameness. The nervous system and embryonic development were linked. The proto-dogs of the Pleistocene were undergoing their own natural, slower version of Belyaev's experiment. Selected for friendship, they became friends. And in doing so, their very form began to subtly shift from the wolfish archetype. Their skulls became slightly wider, their snouts potentially shorter, their teeth smaller. They began to retain juvenile, puppy-like behaviors like playfulness and dependence into adulthood, a phenomenon called neoteny. But when did these companions become true dogs in the archaeological record? We look for a shift from mere bones in a midden, which could just be a meal, to a deliberate burial, and we find it. Our oldest, undisputed evidence comes from a 14,200-year-old grave in Bonn-Oberkassel, Germany. Here, buried carefully between a man and a woman, lies a dog. It was a medium-sized animal, clearly not a wolf. This was a being that mattered in life and in death. The bond had transcended utility. It was emotional, spiritual. The pact was sealed. So, as the last ice sheets retreated and the Holocene dawned, the dog was firmly at our side. But what happened next, as human civilization itself began to sprout, flourish, and build empires? The dog's journey, its roles, were about to multiply in ways our Paleolithic ancestors could never have dreamed. As humans transitioned from nomadic life to agriculture, to villages, to the first great cities and empires, the dog's portfolio expanded dramatically. It was no longer just a hunting partner and camp sentinel. It became a divine symbol, a guardian of the afterlife, a weapon of war, and a living ornament of status. The dog became a mirror reflecting the values and needs of each culture that embraced it. Let's begin in the sun-baked land of ancient Egypt. Here, dogs were revered with a fascinating complexity. They were intimately linked to the afterlife through Anubis, the jackal-headed god. Notice, Anubis was not a demon or a monster. He was a protector, a guide for souls through the Duat, the underworld, and the divine embalmer who prepared dead. The dog's loyalty was seen to extend beyond death. Pet dogs were often mummified and buried with their owners to accompany them into the next world. We even know their names from surviving leather collars and inscriptions. Brave one, reliable, good herdsman, useless. The last one offers a delightful hint of ancient humor and honesty. But the Egyptians were also practical. Greyhound-like breeds, the Tessem, hunted gazelle for the nobility. Powerful mastiff-type dogs guarded homes and temples and trotted alongside the chariots of the pharaoh's army. Now, let's cross the Mediterranean to ancient Greece. Here, philosophy and poetry met canine fidelity. The most iconic literary dog is Argos, from Homer's epic The Odyssey. After 20 years of war and wandering, Odysseus returns home disguised as a ragged beggar. The only being in his palace who recognizes him is his old dog, Argos, lying neglected on a dung heap. Upon seeing his master, Argos wags his tail, drops his ears, and then dies. It is one of the most poignant scenes in all of literature, a pure, silent testament to unwavering loyalty that shames the disloyal human suitors in the hall. The philosopher Aristotle took a more analytical view. In his History of Animals, he classified dogs by their function: livestock guardians, hunting dogs, watchdogs. He noted their intelligence, their different temperaments, and even attempted an early kind of pedigree history, suggesting that the Molossian hound of Epirus was the progenitor of other types. But for sheer scale, organization, and brutality in the use of dogs, we must look to Imperial Rome. The Romans were masterful engineers of war, and they applied this mindset to dogs. They developed the Molossus, a massive, heavy-boned ancestor of the Mastiff, and turned it into a living weapon. These dogs were equipped with spiked collars and sometimes even leather or metal armor. They served as front-line attackers to break enemy formations, as camp guards, and as executioners in the arenas, where they were set upon condemned criminals and prisoners of war. Yet in stark contrast, within the Roman domus, the home, small companion dogs were doted upon. The Maltese, known as Melite, were cherished lapdogs. We have a touching poem from the 1st century AD, inscribed on a woman's tomb. My eyes were wet with tears, a little dog, when I bore thee to the grave. So, Patricus, never again shalt thou give me 1,000 kisses. The duality is breathtaking. The same culture that bred dogs for savage spectacle also wept for a tiny companion named Patricus, the noble one. We must also cast our gaze east. In ancient China, particularly during the Han Dynasty, the Peking cheese was developed within the Forbidden City. These were not mere pets. They were sleeve dogs, carried in the voluminous sleeves of robes, believed to ward off evil spirits for the emperor and his court. They were sacred, and to steal one was a capital offense. In the pre-Columbian Americas, the story takes another turn. The Xoloitzcuintli, the hairless dog, was a dietary staple, a source of protein, but it was also a living hot water bottle. Its higher body temperature used to soothe arthritic joints, and a spiritual guide believed to lead the soul safely through the terrifying journey of Mictlan, the underworld. From Egypt to Rome to China, the pattern is clear. The dog is the ultimate adapter. Every ancient civilization molds it to serve a suite of purposes: practical, spiritual, military, and emotional. But this molding was about to become more systematic, more tied to social hierarchy than ever before. The fall of Rome did not diminish the dog's importance. It specialized it within a rigid social order. In the feudal world of medieval Europe, your dog was a walking emblem of your class and profession. This is the era where the loose types of antiquity began to crystallize into the recognizable ancestors of our modern breeds, defined by specific form, following specific function. For the nobility, hunting was the central theater of life, not just for food, but for sport, for training in warfare, and for displaying power. The hunt required a specialized canine caste, each with a distinct role, and breeding was directed to perfect these roles. The sighthounds, the greyhounds, Salukis, and Irish wolfhounds. These were the aristocrats of the canine world. Built for breathtaking speed and chase by sight, they hunted swift game like deer and hare. They were so valued they were often allowed to sleep in their master's chambers, and their theft or killing was punishable by heavy fines. The scent hounds, the bloodhounds, St. Huberts, and later the foxhounds, possessed of legendary, almost mystical olfactory powers. They were the tireless trackers. They worked more closely with the professional huntsman, following cold trails for miles. The bird dogs, spaniels, and early setters. Their role was to flush game birds from thick brush so they could be caught by nets, or later shot by arrows and then by guns. The mastiffs and allons, still the guardians of castle and manor. Their war dog ancestry now turned to personal protection and to the dangerous holding of large, fierce game like wild boar. The law enshrined these distinctions. England's forest laws were particularly severe. A commoner caught owning a greyhound-type dog could have the animal's front toes cut off, a process called lawing or expeditation, to cripple its ability to chase the king's deer. The peasant's dog, it was a mixed-breed cur, a drover moving cattle to market, a herder of sheep, or a humble turnspit dog, a short-legged, long-bodied breed, condemned to run for hours in a wooden wheel that turned a roasting spit over the kitchen fire. What does this tell us? It tells us that selective breeding was now fully intentional and sophisticated. Form was being meticulously sculpted for function. A greyhound's deep chest for lung capacity and aerodynamic curve, a bloodhound's droopy skin and long ears to trap and waft scent particles toward its nose, a terrier's compact, tough body for going to ground after vermin. These were design traits. And then, in the courts of the Renaissance, we see the flourishing of the ultimate non-working dog, the lapdog, the toy spaniel, immortalized in paintings by Titian and Van Dyck, nestled in the laps of duchesses and princesses, was a living ornament. It symbolized a lady's refinement, her wealth, and her sheltered life. It served another, more pragmatic purpose, whispered in history, as a living flea trap. The belief was that fleas and lice would prefer the dog's coat to the elaborate silks and ruffs of the nobility. Through the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, the dog was fully codified within the human social order. But a gathering storm of new ideas, scientific revolution, global exploration, and industrial might was about to scatter dogs across the planet and reshape their very bodies with an intensity that would dwarf the efforts of any medieval breeder. We now arrive at the most transformative and in many ways the most troubling chapter in our story, the long 19th century. This is the era when the dog, as a general type, shattered into the modern concept of the purebred dog. Three powerful forces collided: Victorian sentimentality and social climbing, the rise of organized science and taxonomy, and the spectacular power of public spectacle and commerce. First, the social engine. The explosive growth of the middle class in Victorian Britain created a new demand. These merchants, industrialists, and professionals sought the trappings of the aristocracy they emulated. Owning a fine dog of a defined type was a perfect marker of status and taste. But which dog was the right one? The answer was provided by a new form of public competition, the dog show. The first modern, organized dog show was held in Newcastle upon Tyne in 1859, for pointers and setters only. It was a sensation. The idea spread like wildfire. Suddenly, there was a pressing need for rules, for standards of comparison. What precisely defines the perfect Scottish Terrier? How many inches tall at the shoulder? What is the exact angle of the stop in the forehead? What shade of wheaten is acceptable for the coat? Breed clubs formed to answer these questions. The Kennel Club in Britain was founded in 1873. The American Kennel Club in 1884. They created the breed standard, a detailed written blueprint for the ideal specimen of each breed. This was a revolutionary shift. The primary goal was no longer just function for work in the field, but form conforming to an aesthetic ideal on the show bench. Conformation became king, and this is where our story takes its dark turn. In their fervent pursuit of this manufactured perfection, Victorian breeders embraced a powerful and dangerous tool: systematic inbreeding, to fix desirable traits, a particular head shape, a rare color, a more luxuriant coat. They bred closely related dogs, fathers to daughters, brothers to sisters. They created severe genetic bottlenecks, founding entire modern breeds on just a handful of popular champion dogs. Unknowingly, they also concentrated the hidden, harmful recessive genes that lurk in all populations. Let's look at the physical changes wrought in just a few decades of this intense selection for show ring ideals. The bulldog, once a muscular, athletic, and agile dog used for the barbaric sport of bull baiting, it was completely redesigned. Its legs were shortened, its body made massively stocky, its face pushed flatter and flatter into an extreme brachycephalic shape. The result? A dog prone to severe breathing difficulties, overheating, dental problems, and an inability to give birth naturally. The German Shepherd, originally a versatile, athletic herding dog, in some show lines, his hindquarters were sloped so dramatically that its gait changed, leading to debilitating hip dysplasia and spinal issues. The Basset Hound. Its already short legs were made even shorter, its skin made more excessively loose, and its back lengthened, leading to a host of orthopedic problems, chronic ear infections, and eyelid issues. This was unintentional consequence on a monumental scale. The desire for a recognizable type had morphed into a demand for a uniform, exaggerated brand, often at the direct expense of the animal's health, mobility, and quality of life. A schism opened that persists today. The working line versus the show line, often two genetically and physically distinct populations within the same breed. Yet the 19th century was also an era of incredible canine diversification and new roles. The Industrial Revolution created novel niches. Ratter breeds like the Manchester Terrier and various terriers were essential in the factories, mills, and sewers of burgeoning cities. As police forces formalized, dogs were incorporated, first in continental Europe, then in Britain and America. The heroic narrative of the St. Bernard rescuing travelers in the Swiss Alps was cemented in the public imagination, and the ultimate Victorian sentimental tale was born in Edinburgh. Greyfriars Bobby, the Skye Terrier, who supposedly guarded his master's grave for 14 years. True or embellished, the Victorians adored it. It fit their ideal of faithful, almost religious devotion. So by the dawn of the 20th century, the canine world stood at a crossroads, more glorified, more precisely categorized, and more genetically troubled than ever before. And the coming century would subject this beloved companion to the fires of global war before elevating it to the status of family member and medical partner. The 20th century was a century of extremes for humanity, and dogs were swept into the maelstrom. They faced the mechanized horrors of our wars, and in the peace that followed, were welcomed into the intimate heart of the modern family as never before. In the trench-scarred landscapes of World War I, dogs served with quiet bravery. They were messengers, carrying crucial notes through bullet-raked no-man's land when human runners would be cut down. They were sentries, their keen ears detecting enemy movement. They were casualty dogs, or Sanitätshunde, trained to find wounded soldiers, carrying medical supplies in their packs, and staying with the dying to offer comfort. They were mascots, providing a shred of psychological relief from the grinding terror. World War II saw this mobilization expand exponentially. The Soviet Red Army used tank hunting dogs, tragically trained with food under tanks, a fate that speaks to the dark desperation of war. In the Pacific Theater, the United States Marine Corps made legendary use of Doberman pinschers as scouts, messengers, and guards on treacherous jungle patrols. Their loyalty and effectiveness were so profound that the Doberman became an enduring symbol of the Corps, honored with a memorial on the island of Guam. War also had a homogenizing, destructive effect on breeds. Borders closed, populations were isolated or decimated. Many European breeds teetered on the brink of extinction, only to be painstakingly rebuilt in the post-war years from a tiny handful of surviving dogs. And then came the peace. The post-war economic boom, the rise of suburbia, created the modern paradigm, the suburban family dog. The dog moved decisively from the working yard or the barn into the house. It had its own bed, its own bowl, its own toys. Commercial, scientifically formulated dog food replaced table scraps. Veterinary medicine led forward, with vaccines, antibiotics, and specialized surgeries becoming commonplace. spaying and neutering were widely adopted, beginning to address the age-old problem of uncontrolled reproduction. The dog's primary function had completed a historic shift from work to companionship. It was now a pet in the fullest, most emotional sense. This shift, however, had an unintended consequence: the overpopulation crisis. The sheer number of unwanted dogs flooding public shelters became a visible social problem. This tragedy sparked the modern animal welfare movement, crystallizing in the powerful ethical imperative: adopt, don't shop. Simultaneously, science began to peer into the dog's mind with new tools. The field of canine cognition was born. Researchers like Stanley Coren explored their intelligence, suggesting they could understand hundreds of words. Landmark studies by Brian Hare and others revealed that dogs possess a unique, innate ability to read human gestural cues, like pointing, better than even our closest primate relatives. They demonstrated that dogs likely experience complex secondary emotions like jealousy and empathy. They weren't just conditioned Pavlovian machines. They were thinking, feeling beings with a sophisticated, if different, social intelligence tuned specifically to us. This new understanding fueled an explosion of specialized roles that leveraged the unique dog-human bond. Service dogs evolved far beyond guide dogs for the blind to include hearing dogs, mobility assistance dogs, and dogs trained to alert to seizures or diabetic lows. Therapy dogs, deployed in hospitals, nursing homes, schools, and disaster areas to provide measurable physiological and psychological comfort. Detection dogs, utilizing their sublime sense of smell, they now sniff out not just drugs and explosives, but agricultural contraband, bed bugs, and with astonishing accuracy, diseases like cancer, Parkinson's, and malaria from human samples. Conservation dogs, working with biologists to track endangered species like cheetahs or koalas, and to locate invasive plants, their non-invasive methods revolutionizing field research. And what of our current moment, the 21st century? We are living in the midst of a great dog divide, a tension between two powerful forces. On one side, we have the rise of genetic science and ethical responsibility. We can now DNA test a dog to screen for hundreds of hereditary diseases. This knowledge, combined with a growing public awareness, has fueled a powerful movement toward responsible, health-focused breeding. There is a push in some breeds to carefully rewind away from extreme physical standards, to breed for longer snouts, healthier hips, and more natural proportions. The well-being of the dog is, for many, becoming the paramount concern. On the other side, we have the power of the internet, social media, and commercial markets. This has driven the explosion of designer dogs or hybrids, like the Labradoodle, often marketed with overstated health and hypoallergenic promises. More troublingly, platforms like Instagram can create overnight demand for cute or unique breeds, such as the French Bulldog. Their skyrocketing popularity has, tragically, accelerated irresponsible breeding focused on profit, exacerbating the severe health problems associated with their extremely flat faces and compact bodies. We are also beginning to understand dogs as unique individuals, not just representatives of their breed. The work of cognitive ethologists like Dr. Alexandra Horowitz urges us to see the world from the dog's point of nose, to appreciate that they live in a rich, layered universe of scent that is as vivid and informative to them as vision is to us. So, where does this 40,000-year journey leave us today? As we stand at this present moment, looking back on the shared path and forward into an uncertain future, we are faced with profound questions. We are the stewards of this ancient pact, and the answers we forge will define the next chapter of our shared story. First, the genetic and ethical question. We now hold unprecedented power. With advanced genetics and tools like CRISPR, we could theoretically edit dogs to correct centuries of man-made health problems. Do we have a moral obligation to fix the bulldog's airway or the German shepherd's predisposition to hip dysplasia? Or does that veer into a new, unnerving kind of genetic design, further objectifying them? Where is the line between healing and redesigning? Second, the welfare and equity question. Can we reconcile our deep cultural love for dogs with the stark realities of overpopulation, puppy mills, and the ethical dilemmas of breed-specific legislation? How do we build a future where every dog is either responsibly bred for health and temperament or lovingly adopted into a suitable, permanent home? This is a question of social will, education, and policy. Third, the philosophical and existential question. What, in its deepest essence, is this bond? Modern science offers a breathtaking clue. Studies show that when a human and a dog share a mutual gaze, levels of oxytocin, the bonding or love hormone, spike in both brains. This is a biochemical feedback loop of affection. We didn't just domesticate them. In a very real, physiological sense, they domesticated us in return, nurturing our own capacity for cross-species connection and care. They hijacked our parental care pathways. The history of the dog is, in its final analysis, a reflection of the history of humanity itself. It reflects our fears and our courage, our cruelty and our compassion, our vanity and our capacity for selfless love. The dog has been a silent witness to it all, asking for little more than a scrap of food, a kind word, a place by the fire. That moment of pure, unguarded joy when you cross the threshold of your home, the frantic tail, the wiggling body, the joyful noise, that is not just an animal greeting its food source. That is the living, breathing legacy of a 40,000-year journey. It is the final, beautiful expression of our co-evolutionary braid. It is the wolf who chose to stay, and in staying, taught us about loyalty, about play, about living in the present moment, and perhaps about a better part of our own nature. So, the next time you look into the eyes of a dog, I invite you to pause. You are not just looking at a pet. You are looking into a living piece of history. You are meeting the gaze of our oldest and most faithful ally on this planet. You are witnessing the successful outcome of the most audacious, accidental, and beautiful experiment in interspecies friendship the world has ever known. Thank you. Don't forget to like and subscribe.